My wife introduced me to her work friend. 6 months later, I learned the truth. I, 36 male, have been married to my wife, 34 female, for 11 years. We met in college, built our careers together, and have two amazing kids. If someone had asked me a year ago whether I trusted my wife, I would have answered without hesitation. Absolutely. She was my best friend. About 8 months ago, she started talking about a new coworker named Daniel. At first, it was harmless. Daniel helped me finish a report. Daniel is hilarious. Our whole team went out for lunch, and Daniel kept everyone laughing. I didn't think twice about it. People make friends at work. A few weeks later, the company held a family barbecue. My wife insisted I come, saying she wanted me to meet everyone she worked with. That's where I met Daniel. He was friendly, shook my hand, complimented our kids, and even joked that my wife was the smartest person in the office. He seemed like a genuinely nice guy. Looking back, that's what makes this story so difficult. I smiled, thanked him for being kind to my wife, and even told him that if she ever worked too late, I was glad she had good coworkers around her. He smiled back. "She's lucky to have you," he said. I had no idea he was already sleeping with my wife. For a while, nothing felt out of place. Life went on the way it always had. I went to work, coached my son's soccer team on weekends, and spent evenings helping my daughter with her homework. My wife and I still had dinner together most nights, and we still laughed at the same old TV shows. If there were cracks in our marriage, I didn't see them. Then the little changes began. She started leaving for work 30 minutes earlier than usual. When I asked why, she said traffic had gotten worse. She began staying late at the office at least twice a week. Quarter-end deadlines, she'd say with a tired smile. One evening, she came home wearing a perfume I'd never smelled before. "I picked up a free sample at the mall," she explained. It sounded believable, so I believed her. A month later, she suggested we each have more personal space. She said healthy couples didn't have to spend every evening together and encouraged me to reconnect with old friends or take up a hobby. At the time, I thought she was trying to strengthen our relationship. Now I realize she was creating opportunities to disappear without raising suspicion. The first real warning came from someone I never expected, my 10-year-old son. While we were cleaning up after dinner, he looked at me and asked, "Dad, why does Mom smile at her phone more than she smiles at us?" I laughed it off. Kids notice strange things, I told myself. But later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I found myself replaying his question over and over. For the first time in 11 years, a thought entered my mind that I immediately tried to push away. What if something wasn't right? I told myself I was overthinking it. Marriages change over time. People get busy. Work gets stressful. I refused to become the husband who searched through phones or accused his wife without proof. For a few more weeks, I ignored the feeling. Then, something happened that I couldn't explain away. It was a Friday afternoon, and my wife texted me saying she had another late meeting. "Don't wait up," she wrote. "I'll probably be home after 10. Around 7:30 that evening, I stopped by the grocery store to pick up a few things for the weekend. As I was walking back to my car, I glanced across the parking lot. I froze. My wife's car. At first, I smiled. Maybe her meeting had ended early and she was shopping before coming home. But then I noticed something strange. She wasn't inside the store. Her car was parked near a small Italian restaurant next door. I stood there for a moment, debating whether to call her. Before I could, the restaurant door opened. My wife walked out. She wasn't alone. Daniel was beside her. They were laughing. He reached over and brushed a strand of hair away from her face. She didn't pull away. Instead, she smiled, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. Then he wrapped his arms around her. and she kissed him. Not a quick, awkward kiss, the kind of kiss shared by two people who had done it many times before. My shopping bag slipped from my hands and hit the pavement. Neither of them noticed. They got into separate cars and drove away. I stood there in the parking lot, surrounded by spilled groceries, realizing the life I thought I had was gone, and I hadn't even said a word. I don't remember driving home. The next hour is a blur. I remember sitting in my car outside the house, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Part of me wanted to storm inside the moment she got home. Another part kept hoping there was some explanation, some impossible misunderstanding that would make what I saw disappear. Around 10:15 p.m., her headlights pulled into the driveway. She walked through the front door, looking exhausted. "Hey," she said with a smile. "Sorry I'm late. The meeting ran forever." The lie came so naturally. I looked at her for a long moment before asking, "How was the restaurant?" She froze. "What restaurant?" "The Italian place on Oak Street." For the first time in our marriage, I watched genuine panic spread across her face. I don't know what you're talking about." I nodded slowly. "I saw you." Silence. "I saw you and Daniel." She didn't speak. "I saw him kiss you." Her shoulders dropped. Then, almost in a whisper, she asked, "How long were you there?" That question answered everything. She wasn't asking what I had seen. She already knew. She was trying to figure out how much I knew. "I saw enough," I replied. Tears filled her eyes almost instantly. "It isn't what you think." I couldn't help but laugh. "I watched you kiss another man." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. There was no explanation left, no clever excuse, just the truth standing between us. For the first time in 11 years, neither of us knew what to say next. She sat down at the kitchen table without saying a word. I stayed standing. The silence between us felt unbearable. Finally, she looked up. "I'm sorry." 2 words. After 11 years, that's all she had. I shook my head. "How long?" She stared at the table. "About 6 months." 6 months. Half a year of lies. Half a year of fake meetings, late nights, and excuses. I pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "Did everyone at work know?" She nodded slowly. "A few people." I felt sick. So I was the only one who didn't? She started crying again. "I never wanted to hurt you." I looked at her in disbelief. "You had 6 months to stop." She didn't answer. "You had hundreds of chances to tell me the truth." "Nothing." "You introduced me to him." Her face crumpled. "I know." "You let him shake my hand." She covered her mouth. "You let him smile at our kids." At that point, she broke down completely. I hated myself every time. I leaned back in my chair. "Then why didn't you stop?" For nearly a minute, she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Because every time I tried to end it, I convinced myself I could keep both lives." Those words hurt more than the affair itself. Not because she loved him, but because she believed she could keep me as her husband while secretly building a relationship with someone else. In that moment, I realized something I had been avoiding. The affair wasn't one terrible decision. It was hundreds of deliberate choices, and every single one had come before us. I sat there in silence, trying to process what she had just admitted. Then I asked the question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. "Do you love him?" She looked at me, tears running down her face. I don't know. I closed my eyes. I used to. My eyes opened immediately. What? She nodded, ashamed. At first, I thought I was in love with him. Those words hit me like a punch to the chest. But now? She wiped her eyes. Now I realize I was living in a fantasy. I didn't respond. She continued. Daniel only knew the version of me that escaped responsibilities. He didn't know what it was like to raise kids together, pay bills, argue over money, or support each other through the hard parts of life. I listened quietly. She wasn't defending what she'd done. She was trying to explain how she'd let herself believe the affair was something it wasn't. I kept telling myself I'd end it. Then I'd convince myself one more week wouldn't matter. I stared at the wedding ring on my finger. It mattered. She nodded. I know. No, I said softly. You know now. Back then, you chose him over us every single time. She didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Without saying a word, she unlocked it and slid it across the table. You can read everything. I looked at the phone but didn't touch it. I don't need to. She frowned. I already know enough. For the first time that night, I realized the messages wouldn't change anything. The truth wasn't hidden inside her phone anymore. It was sitting across from me. Neither of us slept that night. She stayed in the living room. I sat in our bedroom staring at old family photos on the wall. Pictures from vacations, birthday parties, the day we bought our first house. Every memory felt different now. Around 6 in the morning, I heard footsteps outside the bedroom door. She knocked softly. Can we talk? I opened the door, but didn't invite her inside. She looked exhausted. I called Daniel, she said. I didn't react. I told him it's over. Forever. I simply nodded. Okay? She looked surprised. That's it? What do you want me to say? I thought you'd... I don't know. Ask to see the messages? I shook my head. Ending it now doesn't erase the last 6 months. Tears welled up in her eyes again. I know. No, I replied quietly. I don't think you do. She looked down. If I hadn't caught you yesterday, would you still be seeing him next week? The silence lasted nearly 30 seconds. Finally, she whispered, probably. That single word hurt more than everything else she'd admitted, because it answered the question that had been haunting me since the restaurant. She hadn't chosen to end the affair. She had been forced to. I realized then that I wasn't grieving the loss of my marriage. I was grieving the version of my wife I believed existed. And those are two very different things. The next morning, we agreed on one thing. Our kids couldn't become casualties of our mistakes. We decided to keep things as normal as possible while we figured out what came next. That turned out to be much harder than either of us expected. At breakfast, our son told us about a science project he was excited to start. Our daughter asked if we were still going to the zoo the following weekend. We smiled. We laughed at the right moments. We acted like everything was fine. The moment the kids left for school, the house fell silent again. It felt like we were living two completely different lives, one for our children, one behind closed doors. That afternoon, I called my older brother. I hadn't told anyone what happened, not my parents, not my friends, not even my closest coworker. When he answered, I tried to sound normal. It lasted about 5 seconds. He interrupted me and asked, "What's wrong?" The words came out before I could stop them. She had an affair. There was a long pause in the other end. Then he said something I'll never forget. You don't have to decide today. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to hear that. For the last 24 hours, my mind had been racing between two extremes. Leave immediately. Try to save the marriage. My brother reminded me there was another option. Take time. Think. Breathe. Don't let the worst day of my life force me into the biggest decision of my life. For the first time since discovering the affair, I felt the tiniest sense of clarity. I didn't know whether my marriage would survive, but I knew I didn't have to answer that question before I was ready. Over the next few weeks, we lived like roommates. She moved into the guest room. We spoke about the kids, groceries, bills, and schedules. Nothing more. The silence between us was strangely polite. There were no screaming matches, no slam doors, just two people who had once shared everything and now barely knew how to speak to each other. One evening she asked if we could take a walk. I almost said no. Instead, I grabbed my jacket. We walked through the neighborhood in complete silence until she finally spoke. I've been going to therapy. I nodded. I know. I've realized something. I waited. I spent months blaming our marriage for my choices. She looked down at the sidewalk. But the truth is, plenty of people have unhappy marriages and never cheat. That was the first thing she'd said since the affair that felt completely honest. She continued, I kept telling myself I deserved to be happy, that I deserved excitement, but I never stopped to think about what my happiness was going to cost everyone else. For the first time, she wasn't asking me to forgive her. She wasn't trying to convince me to stay. She was simply accepting responsibility. I don't expect you to trust me again, she said. I don't even expect you to love me after this. She stopped walking and looked at me. But if this marriage ends, I want you to know it ended because of what I chose to do, not because of anything you failed to be. I didn't know what to say. Her words didn't erase the betrayal. They didn't heal the damage, but they did remove one burden I'd been carrying. For weeks, I'd been wondering what was wrong with me. Standing there, I realized I had been asking the wrong question all along. A month later, I agreed to attend one therapy session with her. Not because I'd decided to stay, because I wanted answers. The therapist asked me a question I wasn't expecting. If your wife had confessed before you found out, would that change how you feel today? I thought about it for a long time. Yes. My wife looked at me surprised. I continued. I'd still be devastated. I'd still feel betrayed, but at least I'd know she chose honesty before she was forced into it. The room fell silent. My wife lowered her head. I wanted to tell you, she whispered. The therapist interrupted gently. Wanting to and doing it are not the same. She nodded through tears. I know. Then the therapist turned to me. What do you need in order to make a decision about your marriage? I expected to say time. Instead, the answer came out almost automatically. I need to know if I'll ever be able to respect myself if I stay. Neither of them spoke, because it wasn't really a question about my wife anymore. It was about me. I realized something important that day. Leaving wouldn't automatically make me strong. Staying wouldn't automatically make me weak. What mattered was why I chose either path. If I stayed because I was afraid of being alone, I'd regret it. If I left only to punish her, I'd regret that too. Whatever happened next had to be based on what kind of life I wanted to build, not on revenge, guilt, or fear. For the first time since the affair, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was beginning to heal. 3 months after everything came crashing down, I finally reached a decision. Not a final one, just the next step. I asked my wife to move into a nearby apartment for a while. It wasn't a punishment, it was the only way I could figure out whether I missed her or simply missed having someone in the house. She agreed, without arguing. "I'll do whatever you need," she said quietly. For the next several weeks, we only saw each other when exchanging the kids. Those interactions were awkward at first, then they became normal. One Saturday, after dropping off our son and daughter, she handed me an envelope. "I wrote you a letter," she said. "I know I don't deserve your time, but if you ever want to read it, it's there." I didn't open it that day. In fact, it sat on my kitchen counter for almost a week. When I finally unfolded it, there wasn't a single excuse inside. No blaming work, no blaming our marriage, no blaming loneliness. Instead, she wrote about every lie she'd told, every opportunity she'd had to stop, every moment she'd chosen the easier path instead of the right one. One sentence caught my attention. "The biggest lie I ever told wasn't to you, it was to myself. I convinced myself I could betray the person I loved and somehow avoid becoming someone I hated." I read that line 3 times. For the first time since this nightmare began, I believed she truly understood what she'd done. But understanding the damage and repairing it were 2 different things. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and stared out the window. I still didn't know whether we had a future together, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever happened next, neither of us would ever be the same people we were before that night outside the restaurant. 4 months after she moved out, something unexpected happened. I stopped thinking about the affair every hour, then every day. Eventually, there were moments when I realized I'd gone an entire weekend without replaying the restaurant parking lot in my head. That didn't mean I was over it. It just meant the pain no longer controlled every thought I had. One afternoon, my wife called. "There's something you deserve to know." My heart sank. "What is it?" "I resigned." I was confused. "From your job?" "Yes." I knew what she meant without asking. Daniel still worked there. I realized I couldn't keep building a new life while staying in the place where I destroyed the old one, she said. I was silent for a moment. "Did you quit because of me?" "No." She took a deep breath. "I quit because every morning I walked through those doors, I was reminded of the worst decision I've ever made. For the first time, I believed she wasn't making choices to impress me. She was making them because she wanted to become a different person." A week later, we met for coffee, not to discuss the kids, not to argue, just to talk. It felt strange. We spoke for nearly 2 hours about work, about life, about the mistakes we'd both made. Not equal mistakes, but honest conversations we'd avoided for years. When we stood up to leave, there was an awkward pause. She looked at me and asked, "Do you think we'll ever be okay?" I thought carefully before answering. "I think we can become okay." She smiled faintly. "But I don't think we'll ever be who we used to be." For the first time, neither of us saw that as a tragedy. Maybe the goal had never been to rebuild the past. Maybe the goal was to build something healthier than we'd ever had before. 6 months after the affair came to light, my wife asked if we could have dinner together. Just the 2 of us. No kids, no therapist, no expectations. I almost declined. Instead, I agreed. We met at a quiet restaurant on the other side of town, the kind of place where nobody knew us. For the first 20 minutes, we talked about ordinary things: our daughter's piano recital, our son's soccer season, a movie we'd both wanted to see. Then the conversation shifted. She looked at me and asked, "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "What was the hardest part?" I expected to say,
seeing you kiss him or reading your messages, but that wasn't my answer. The hardest part, I said, was realizing I no longer trusted my own judgment. She looked confused. I kept thinking, how did I not see it? Was I blind? Was I just naive? She reached for her glass but didn't interrupt. I questioned every memory we had, every compliment you gave me, every I love you. I didn't know what was real anymore. Tears formed in her eyes. I'm so sorry. I know you are. And for the first time, I truly believed she meant it, not because she was crying, not because she wanted another chance, because she wasn't asking me to forgive her. She was simply listening to the pain she'd caused without trying to defend herself. When dinner ended, we walked to our cars. Before getting in, she turned to me. No matter what you decide, she said, thank you for hearing me. I smiled faintly. I didn't do it for you. She tilted her head. I did it so that years from now, I can look back and know I made my decision with a clear mind, not with a broken heart. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not certainty, hope.
9 months after I discovered the affair, I invited her over to the house, the same house where we had raised our children, the same house where our marriage had nearly ended. She looked nervous as she stepped inside. I wasn't sure why you wanted to see me, she admitted. I smiled faintly. Neither was I. We sat at the kitchen table where we'd had the hardest conversation of our lives months earlier. This time, the room felt different. There was no anger, no fear, just honesty. I've been thinking a lot, I began. She stayed quiet. I kept asking myself whether I could ever trust you again. She looked down, and I realized I was asking the wrong question. Her eyes met mine. The real question is whether you're still becoming the person I could trust. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her bag and placed a small notebook on the table. I've been writing in this since the day I moved out. I opened it. Every page contained reflections from therapy, conversations she'd had with herself, the mistakes she'd recognized, the habits she was trying to change. None of it was written to impress me. She never intended for me to read it. I wanted proof, she said quietly, that if I ever asked for another chance, I had actually become someone different, not just someone who was afraid of losing you. I closed the notebook and looked at her. For the first time since that night outside the restaurant, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with years ago. Not because the affair had disappeared, not because the pain was gone, but because she had finally stopped trying to escape responsibility. I took a deep breath. I don't know what the future looks like. She nodded. I know. But she held her breath. I'd like to start dating you again. She stared at me in complete disbelief. You mean? I mean slowly. No promises, no pretending the past didn't happen. Just two people seeing if something new can grow where the old relationship ended. She smiled through tears. For the first time in nearly a year, they weren't tears of guilt. They were tears of hope. 9 months after I discovered the affair, I invited her over to the house, the same house where we had raised our children, the same house where our marriage had nearly ended. She looked nervous as she stepped inside. I wasn't sure why you wanted to see me, she admitted. I smiled faintly. Neither was I. We sat at the kitchen table where we'd had the hardest conversation of our lives months earlier. This time, the room felt different. There was no anger, no fear, just honesty. I've been thinking a lot, I began. She stayed quiet. I kept asking myself whether I could ever trust you again. She looked down, and I realized I was asking the wrong question. Her eyes met mine. The real question is whether you're still becoming the person I could trust. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her bag and placed a small notebook on the table. I've been writing in this since the day I moved out. I opened it. Every page contained reflections from therapy, conversations she'd had with herself, the mistakes she'd recognized, the habits she was trying to change. None of it was written to impress me. She never intended for me to read it. I wanted proof, she said quietly, that if I ever asked for another chance, I had actually become someone different, not just someone who was afraid of losing you. I closed the notebook and looked at her. For the first time since that night outside the restaurant, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with years ago. Not because the affair had disappeared, not because the pain was gone, but because she had finally stopped trying to escape responsibility. I took a deep breath. I don't know what the future looks like. She nodded. I know. But she held her breath. I'd like to start dating you again. She stared at me in complete disbelief. You mean? I mean slowly. No promises, no pretending the past didn't happen. Just two people seeing if something new can grow where the old relationship ended. She smiled through tears. For the first time in nearly a year, they weren't tears of guilt. They were tears of hope.